Meditation is about silence. So we should
Go ahead, Javier.
also be silent. I mean, that would be the best way to talk about it. So for today, we're going on our fifth chapter on the series of the urgency of change. And as you recall, we basically labeled the whole series how to live in this world, which was a question posed to Kay by one of the interlocutors. And I more or less ordered it that way. How to live in this world is the primary question that we all have, that humanity has been living with for a long time. Then the question of awareness, because it's all about awareness, it's all about perception. Kay puts the key to living, loving, beauty, truth, wholeness, order, being in that field. It's just remarkable. I said, well, we should put it somewhere else. Well, no, it's all about awareness. It's all about seeing. He begins with seeing and ends with seeing and disappears in the seeing. And then everything comes right, finds his right place. He said, this is the key. Learn to see, learn to be aware, and the life comes to order. That question is answered in that awareness. Talks about relationship, because life is relationship. What we mean by living in the world is relationship, how we are related to each other. So again, the question of how we relate, how we see relationship, from where, it becomes central. And then we touched on conditioning, because that is one of the key factors that produces division, that isolates us psychologically from one another, and which gives, of course, rise to that. In that division, Kay has this law. In all his teachings, he called it a law. Where there is division, there must be conflict. This is a law, he said. He didn't say, he said, I'm not the oracle of Delphi. I'm not laying down the law. Well, he was laying down the law. He said, this is the law. Pay attention. Notice that wherever in life there is division, there must, psychologically, of course, not the division between me and the chair, there is conflict. Conflict is the origin of sorrow, violence, and so on. So that's not right living. How to live in this world means to live without conflict. He called that the art of living. So art is also involved in all that. And that question of perception, right perception, awareness, and freedom from conditioning, which is part of the wholeness, the rightness of living, the virtue, he calls it sometimes, of right action, skillful action, comes from there, from this perception. And that's kind of the height of it, the culmination, if you like, though it's all of one piece, is what he calls meditation. Meditation, that's what I titled this chapter, because it's the title also of another chapter in that series, meditation and energy, curiously enough, puts meditation and energy together. So I put these chapters, trying to make my own little combination, my little cocktail of subjects from the series in the book. I put this together of meditation and energy as the main thing, because it's the kind of the culmination, as I say, of this movement of awareness, right, that comes to a heightened level of energy, of order. Right? That's where he's driving at the whole time, the ending of conflict, and therefore the dissolving of the factors that waste energy, and bringing energy into a whole, into an undivided, intense movement. That he calls goodness, the release of our total energy, which is at the heart of what he calls the religious mind. So this is his thing. Forget about religion, but keep that question, that sense of the wholeness, intensity, undivided energy and being of the human mind. Right? human mind, maybe that's not human anymore. At that point, is no longer limited by any factors of our background, conditioning, desire, or self. So there is that movement. And then I put it together, meditation and energy, with the ending of thought, because normally that's an association that is made between meditation and the ending of thought. That's what most meditation systems want to put an end to, or a stop to, or a suspension to, but it's related to Kay as well. Kay wasn't talking about method or anything of the sort, but he has thought time must have a stop. He used to quote Shakespeare. There's some Shakespeare quote, I cannot remember it, but something about that, you see, and life stands full, and time that takes survey of all the world must have a stop. He quoted it to us one time from his platform. And he said, must have a stop. That's what Shakespeare said. Don't you know? He wanted us to know Shakespeare. So he said, and I can answer it for myself, which is, yes, he does. He has a stop. He could answer it for himself. We can't answer yet for ourselves, but he gives us a hint, or he tells us how this thought, which is time, can end. And that is part of living, how to live in this world, because for him, time is the enemy. Time is what destroys the order of the human mind, the order of relationships, the integrity of our being. Is the breakdown of it all. So it is, and also, therefore, what wastes energy, what prevents that intensity of energy from flowering into this goodness that he's talking about, this completeness, not completeness, complete is not the word. He uses it, it's something else. Then I move to dreams. Now I'm going on a descending scale from the heights of meditation to the dreaming subject. But I felt that, what do you put it? But I found that chapter extremely beautiful. If you read it, it's about language and the relationship between the language of dreams, which, thanks to Master Freud, we learned we must interpret because it's all very symbolic, and Kay putting all language, dream or waking, together in that same category of symbolism, and therefore breaking making our lives themselves into abstractions. And therefore, as long as that division between the abstraction and the fact remains, interpretation is inevitable. But if that doesn't exist, if the observer is no longer divided and so on, then there's no need for interpretation. That's his thing. So, and in fact, he says there's no need for dreams. That I always found fantastic, because as an adolescent, I was troubled by my dreams, and I wanted not to dream. So he was suggesting there's a way to end all dreams altogether. You see, you shouldn't be row your boat, because life is not a dream, you see. Life is something else when the dreaming process is over. So it's about language. Language is connected with thought. You see, this is the connection I make. Meditation as implying an awareness, a non-division intensity of energy. Thought as the factor, time and so on, that it breaks it down. Thought as language. We're in the sphere of language and we're in the sphere of thought. Therefore, they're connected. And Kay also talks about it's not thought only conscious thought, but also unconscious thought. So the dream is one, we take it normally. Kay questions the separation conscious, unconscious, but there is that general sense in our lives that there's an unconscious going on, and he speaks his own language. For him, they're both of a piece. Right? But he has to address the unconscious anyway, can't escape from that responsibility. Beauty and the artist. Why would you bring beauty and the artist in the picture? Well, this is because it was asked this way, but actually it's about the art of living. So it's about wholeness again. Krishnamurti never loses sight, whatever he touches, of this question of wholeness. So beauty and the artist is about, again, skill in action. What was it in? Skill in action in the whole of life. He calls that artistry. That's very beautiful. Artistry is skill in action in the whole field of life. And he says, and that is beauty. Right? But there is no art without love. So he puts them together, right? Art, skill in action, beauty and love as one continuous movement. Now that's part of wholeness. And again, the critical aspect, Krishnamurti's negative approach to all this, though he puts it positively as going at the factors that prevent this skill in action. What is skill? See, artistry is skill, skill in action. So we want to look at that. And self-expression, that's what the artist, the problem of the artist, but it has to do also with creativity. What beauty is, does it need expression? Does it not? So he puts the emphasis not on expression, but on something else, in the intensity, authenticity of the feeling itself. Now, when I was looking at the whole series of chapters that I had already included, I noticed that I had left one out of the whole series. Look at it. You see, like the sheep is missing from the herd. You go looking for it. So I found it, this sheep, and it's a chapter that is very central and critical of the whole thing. We did a chapter on what is. So I'm sorry about that. I left one chapter that you probably didn't read. It's not very long, and it's not particularly profound, but it's central because it connects with the whole thing. The whole thing of Krishnamurti is stay with what is, see with what is. Our fundamental problem is that we don't see it, and therefore we are living in an illusion. So this is where I bring it in. So that's it. In a way, I don't have much else to say, you see, but I'll give it a little run since I have a few minutes. Um, Meditation. Now, Krishnamurti talked a lot about it, and his books are full of it. He usually, his public talks in his later years ended on the topic of meditation. Oh, well, it was like this, but so it was not the last chapter, meditation, but it was the one just before last, because it's that necessary state of mind, which is the prelude to the emergence of something deeper, is the condition, if you like, though condition is a tricky word to use in this context, the sine qua non without which the other doesn't emerge, because it's the surging into a space of emptiness, of where the new can happen. And that's part of what it means to live rightly in the world, is not to have a formula that we're going to apply. We already figured out the economics, the politics, the this, the that, and the other, and then we're going to keep to that. That's not possible, apparently, for human beings. Because, I don't know why, but maybe because life is new, and without the contact with the new, we lack the creativity that we need to respond adequately to that which constantly renewing itself or moving beyond the known. The known can only be provisional, and it will sustain itself as long as the conditions that it refers to hold. But we have to keep our eye on those conditions because they are likely to shift. Even gravity will eventually shift according to the scientists, right? Because the sun will blow up. Well, no, not blow up, will inflate and will burn us to a cinder if we are alive by then. So careful, protect yourself with some heat protective suits. Meditation was for Kay central in that regard, right? Because it was, as I said, as I suggested, the kind of culmination of this movement of awareness towards the opening of the manifestation of total energy. He had a bit of a problem with the word, just as an aside, because, like Bohm reminded him, the word meditation meant measure, has a root meaning measure, and for Krishnamurti, measure is the antithesis of meditation. You're not measuring anything. You're not even projecting a goal that we are experiencing. Meditation denies method, for Krishnamurti denies method, which means you do this and you get that. Denies means to an end. It's not a means to an end. Interesting, I put it almost in those terms, no? It's kind of the condition, I said, for something else to emerge. It may be the necessary condition, but it's not the cause of what happens next. What happens next is completely free. The emergence of truth, of beauty and goodness is not dependent or not caused by that, but without it, it won't happen. It's his famous little metaphor of, all you can do is to put your house in order and open the window. The wind You cannot control the wind, which is the spirit, right? You will control the wind. But if you don't do that, when the wind blows, it won't come in. So it's an opening, it's just the opening. The opening is not the wind, but without it, you won't come in. And if the place is a mess, you won't be coming in either. The wind doesn't like disorder, it seems. It doesn't like disorder. It likes order. It's order itself, you see, and it communicates with that which is order, right? And which is open and which is free. Right? So that's the nature of the spirit. So that's what he was talking about meditation. So it is not measure, but he preferred the word, so he kept it. We always had to deny the etymological meaning. So in this case, his etymological meaning didn't help him. It was against his meaning. So method is out, measure therefore is out, experience is out, authority is out, even one's own past is out. What is not out? So Krishnamurti's meditation, even though, as I shared with some of you, maybe in a different context, he did make suggestions as to how to explore meditation. He talked to the kids, his schools and the teachers primarily. He didn't talk publicly about anybody because he didn't want to create methods. And this lends itself to becoming a method, even from Krishnamurti's own suggestion. So it just means, sit down and watch without the watcher. Now that's already an issue. How would you watch without the watcher? He's already made life difficult for everybody, apparently, because the watcher is there. But this is the essence of the whole teaching, if you like. There's the question of perception as change, the question of perception as difference, the question of perception as freedom and the ground of beauty and being. Is this, that the watcher is the one that is creating these divisions and conflicts. The watcher is in the way of truth. The watcher is in the way of freedom. The watcher is that which fragments, according to him. So could we begin already to watch without the watcher? Now that doesn't mean watching without thought. You're watching thought without the watcher. So you see, it gets a twist. That is not like most meditation systems might suggest, that you have to stop thought altogether to start. So they repeat the mantra or whatever they do, or they fix on an image and so on, or even pay attention to your breath, something present, you see, because the present obviously by itself, if you're aware of it, excludes the past. You can't be aware of your breath if you're thinking about music. So there is something to that. But it's a forcing, it's a concentration. So he says, don't concentrate, because that's again conflict, see? And conflict is the denial of the art of living, which this is about, right? Conflict is duality, the observer wanting, I want to be aware, and therefore I'm forcing this out of my awareness, which prevents my awareness. So be aware of not being aware. Be aware of whatever movement takes place without judging, comparing, and so on. That for him was the beginning. He called it choiceless awareness. That was the beginning of meditation. The beginning, he said, you try it, play with it, it's fun. He said it was fun. When I tried it, it wasn't fun at all. It was very difficult at the beginning. But then you get the hints, you see, it needs persistence. I'm afraid that he's thinking about no effort, no this, no that. Well, careful, be careful. You won't be comfortable. You won't be comfortable because it is a challenge to even begin to pay attention to anything. And then you know that distraction comes in. You see, he said to us, take that word out of your vocabulary. There's no distraction in life. Boy, was that we couldn't take it out of our vocabulary, you see. So I was distracted. Sorry. We used it all the time. Our thinking was distraction. Our desires were distractions. Our fears and so on were distractions. Yet they are not distractions because they are the fact. You can't look at them as contrary to attention if you are attentive to them. So that's the whole thing, to be attentive to whatever is without judgment, choice. He was to say, all thought is just thought. Don't think of it as good or bad. It's just thought, arises, blooms, and dies. Follow the movement, natural movement of thought. Don't divide it, don't exclude it, don't resist it, don't identify with it. So it's a very delicate exercise, right? But that is already non-separation, see, from thought itself. You see, we think, of course, normally we present it like thought is the factor of division. It is, but there is an observation of thought possible which does not divide us from it. And in that non-division, we can begin to learn, right? Meditation is learning in that sense, right? He said some phrase there to the effect that, meditation is the awareness of the move. Part of meditation is the awareness of the movement of self. Right? So it's not excluded from meditation. We have a self, most of us, and its functions, whatever the self is, we'll see, or we might begin to see. That is there. So to stay with what is, if the self is what is, then to stay with it is meditation. In this way, that self, as we learn, as the observation goes, may in fact end up dissolving it. Awareness has a transformative effect. Non-duality dissolves duality. That's the thing that keeps coming through in him, which I'm not quite grasping. But he says, if you observe what is, psychologically we're talking about, without division, that changes what is. I think in some cases dissolves it. He suggests, let's put it forward and discuss maybe, if we are capable of observing fear without separating ourselves from it, that fear is transformed. It may not be fear at all. Fear may be produced, may be actual, is a feeling, but then is emphasized by our recognition of it, by the word. If we don't use the word and its connotations to observe it, there's no observer of fear, then fear may be something entirely different. All our feelings may be entirely different from what we assume without the preconceptions that we bring to bear on them in observation. So observation can transform even that which we find to be contrary to our sense of order. Order is found through undivided, non-dual observation of what is, even when those movements seem to be contrary to order. Order is non-separation from what is. All right, we'll leave it there as a problem to solve. So what is meditation is this, you see, meditation. But here he had something very interesting, which I had not heard him say before, and which is always interesting to explore, the newness that he continuously keeps bringing across to us in this exploration of his, which is of ourselves. And that is that meditation is the essence of energy. Now, what does it mean? Meditation is the essence of energy. What is the essence of energy? My sense is that it doesn't mean that it is the sword or anything, but that it is, as he puts it elsewhere, and maybe my interpretation may be wrong, or my association may be wrong, that meditation is the summation of energy. It is like the gathering of it in its totality. Totality not as a sum, but as sort of the intensity of it, the non-fragmentation of energy. And that's what he talks about. Everything is energy, but we waste energy. We waste energy in unnecessary thought, in unnecessary feeling, in unnecessary activity. So the necessary and the unnecessary also becomes one part of his criterion. But above all, he talks about the wastage of energy in conflict. So conflict, that's why he always starts, basically, as far as I'm concerned, he used to, eventually, when he came to realize that there was a structure to his teachings, an unfolding of it, the book of life he described. He begins, basically, the first chapter is on conflict, because that's the evidence we have. That's the fact that we live with, the fragmentation that pervades our lives, in our relationships with things, people, ideas, and inwardly in terms of our psychology. The self is split from itself, is a denial of its own qualities and an assertion of others. It's in a duality within itself, it's in conflict. One desire is in conflict with another, one idea is in conflict with another. Even within thinking, there are different conflicts. And then thought is in conflict with the fact. and so on and so forth. There is just thoroughgoing fragmentation. For him, that is the indication, the evidence. That's what is, by the way. So we have to understand it, be able to stay with it, not run away again to any other ideal or ideology or belief, right? As he said, the God we invent is still us. You see, he will not save us. It's just the projection of our own being, of an escape from our own troubles. We have to face ourselves. God is just us, elevated to the category of immortality, like the Greeks used to do with their anthropomorphic gods, right? So this is meditation, is the essence of energy. And it's the essence of energy because it is a way of seeing in which this sense of comparison, measure, judgment, duality, observer, observed, according to him, is not there. Therefore, there's not the wastage of energy. Is that a suggestion as to what meditation might mean? Is that what happens when we experience is not the word, see? He's destroying my language, Krishnamurti. The sense of being so in touch with something that there's no division, is that energy? It's clarity, at least, right? There's a sense of clarity. There's a sense of non-friction. And then there's a sense of ease also in our own being when we are in that state. Because the self knows this friction, almost continuous, between one thought and another, one person and another. Every state, almost, every opinion has a counter-opinion. I just came from a dialogue this today from 11 o'clock until 5 this afternoon over lunch. The Spanish dialogues, they last the whole day. And we only ended it because I said, I'm sorry, I have to go. Have another dialogue. So there he was, you see, contradiction plus contradiction. We're all friends, but there is contradiction. And contradiction is the word means what it says, is to say something against something else. Contradicere, to say against. That's the meaning, right? And somebody believes, in some conspiracy theory, and somebody says that's a conspiracy theory. I said, how do you know? And so on. He went on over lunch, the whole thing, and two old friends almost came to say, I'm not listening to you anymore, right? So there you have it, contradiction. Contradiction is the sign, fragmentation, the wastage of energy, and that is created by thought and our approach to thought when it constitutes the me, right? So the me, for Kay, as you know, is very central, and we have to understand it, because for him is the quintessence of the past, is what creates an identification with that past, is what that the essence of the observer, and what creates a division and conflict in the world, and what makes our lives, painful and even tragic, if you take it to that extent. So that is one aspect of meditation. I'm not covering the whole field of meditation. But then you see the ending of thought that we've mentioned is what people try to do. I should stop thought. Thought is the troublemaker. Kay says as much most of the time. But you see, the moment we oppose something, we are the troublemakers. The trouble is the opposition to the different factors. And who's opposing thought? That's what Kay says, right? Wow, how would you stop thought? We have methods, systems, and so on. And some people say, yes, my thought stopped. I suppose it can stop. Most of us probably have experienced that. The moment when thought stops, that's a different state. I mean, it's beautiful. That's why we want it, right? We would, if we could, we would get addicted to it. It's the best drug you can find. When thought stops, it's just joy. You just feel free from all, because you're free from yourself. The self is the burden of pain for some reason, right? The thinker is his own pain and his own pleasure, right? That's why he talks about the pleasure of the pain of the self, right? Or the pain of the pleasure of self, right? There's just the continuous turning around of its own internal contradictions. Why is the self contradictory, right? So contradictory and so painful that its ending is when we experience real joy, right? That's what we will want to do. And thought is, of course, the maker of all this. Without thought, there's no thinker. That's what he says anyway. That's another question, big question for us, I suppose, to really perceive that. But Without thought, there's no thinker. So, though there is no observer without the past. So it is time, it is the observer, it is thought. For K doesn't disagree that thought needs to stop. In fact, he added in this chapter something really very beautiful and I think quintessential from his point of view anyway, but I think for us, for most of us, because he says it is the stopping of thought, perhaps in certain fields even, because we need thought in some fields. He's talking psychologically. That's one thing that we need to remind ourselves the whole time. I need to remind myself at any rate the whole time. He's talking most psychologically. You can't stop thought scientifically. There he goes. And even the scientists need to stop it if they want to find something new, right? That is interesting because thought somehow is, as he says, can't function without memory. So it is a continuation of memory, modified. When it meets the present, it alters itself, and it goes on. But what that past does, seeking is continuity. Without continuity, it doesn't hold. Without accumulation, it can't hold because it's memory. So it needs it. It's the substance of thought, right? Remember, there's the levels of consciousness. There's superficial consciousness, so-called, and the movement of thought, basically. What is it? Which includes, of course, not just, thinking practically about things, but includes desire, includes will. The movement of consciousness is the movement of desire, of fear, of practical thought, of calculation, remembrance, all that movement. But remembrance is behind it. The substance of thought, it's memory. So he says that's an issue because if that's the whole of our consciousness, and consciousness is our life. The life of human beings is consciousness, is the quintessence of human life. Then we're living in the past, essentially. We're living, or we're being lived by the past. And that's not living. So the question of stopping thought or putting thought in its right place, as he sometimes expresses it, perhaps more adequately, is a question of living or not. You see, it's a question of life and death. If that thought continues, then we're not fully alive. And we're talking about how to live in this world, not how to be dead in this world, which most people seem to be. So careful. I mean, not others. Yeah, there seem to be an element of the dead remnants of the past that are so much with us that we can't meet the living flame of, the burning flame of living. Right? That's the question. We don't have that passion. We don't have that energy. The energy of living, life without conflict, life without the past, is burning and alive. Maybe that's also what meditation is bringing us in touch with, that it is the encounter with that total intensity of the living moment, without that burden, that filter, that shadow, like he says, of the past. The past is continuously casting its shadow on the present. The observer is continuously casting his shadow on what he looks at. And that shadow hides something from view. So we're not seeing, we're not in touch with the new, and the creative factor of living itself does not emerge for us. We're not the creative, we become mechanical, right? So freedom is also very important there. It's freedom from this mechanical factor. So the stopping of thought, or putting thought in its right place, so that it functions where it must, and then is silent, is one key factor that he considers in this whole picture, you see. So dying to the past, he says, is what stops thought. But he says you can't stop thought yourself because you are thought. So you're not going to stop yourself because that's just another way of continuing by opposing some factor that you don't like. So how does thought stop? He says it stops when you see where it does not belong, where you see where the dead factor comes in, the destructive factor of thinking. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she had a kind of perception. She was talking to her father, and her father is very traditional, and traditional father, and thinks that his children must look after him and so on. So she was trying to do something good for him. She bought him a pair of shoes that would help him to walk because he has some problems walking with his feet. So I sent him a pair of shoes. He said, "Oh, those shoes, I'm not putting them on." They say, why not? I'm going to just send them to you to so what? Because you are the one who has to look after my feet. You understand? The notion, the thought of the duty of children to look after the foot, whereas he was sending them the shoes to look after his feet. But they have, you expect something more direct from that person. I mean, I'm not sure how that works in that tradition, an Indian tradition of some kind. So that she was the one who was responsible for his feet, not his wearing the shoes. You understand? We fail to act in relation to that, which is good for us and which actually shows the care of others, because we have an idea of their duty in relation to us. Thought in that instance, I'm not sure it's coming across very clearly. I saw it very clearly when she was talking. Uh, Thought interferes with the right relationship and the right response. Our ideas of what should be prevent the encounter with what is. We have ideals, and therefore we don't stay with the facts. And therefore we miss each other, and we miss even the love and the care that is being shown. Think about that. We can miss each other because thought is off onto something else. So careful with thinking. Thought, therefore, will stop if one sees that. If one sees that that thought is destructive of that relationship, and Krishnamurti is very good at pointing out how thought destroys relationship with images, with the past, with what should be, the expectations they impose on each other, the missing of each other, passing each other and like ships in the night because of the images of the expectations. Everybody is going on to their own satisfactions and desires, right? Well, we miss each other. That's destructive of relationship. We look at images. We see each other through images, through symbols. That's what he's talking about. If we were to see that, then that would stop. So it's seeing that stops thinking, not another thought that seeks some result. He distrusts, he dismisses actually the whole causal system of operating upon thought with some other ulterior motive in mind. That there is only seeing that can transform this state of consciousness. This symbolic way of living is how he looked at the whole question of dreams. You can see, I was thinking, my God, what's he saying? That if we live within thinking, thinking is language, it's symbol, it's image, it's representation, and we approach everything like that, we are indeed living in a dream. The dreaming process is the waking process. It's just the other side, what happens in sleep, versus what happens during the day. I look through my images, I interpret the world through my words, this fits into my scheme of knowledge, and then I go on identifying with part of that knowledge. So my being is within the context of the known, and my reality is the context of the known, which is a system of representation. Human beings in consciousness live within a system of representation. So, but do I actually see? Or do I only see the representation? As the word means, represent. It's not present, it's represented by the symbol. So I'm responding to already some past. And that's the problem. When I meet my girlfriend, I respond to her as yesterday. She is known to me. My desire may be a projection to the future, but it's a remembrance of things past, pleasant. And my fear is a remembrance of things past, projected to the future. And so on. The pain of things past. She and I are in a movement of things past, which don't quite meet the present, because we meet each other with that past. That past would end if I see the destructive factor, how I'm not seeing her, and therefore not really loving her, but just the image of her that I treasure as pleasing to me or satisfactory to me, the one that flatters me, the one that thinks I'm great, but the one that says you're a fool, that I don't want. So, hey, careful. She is a living human being, and she will tell me what she wants to tell me. Can I play along? Say, yes, I'm a fool today. I wasn't yesterday, but don't fix me. Then let's not fix anything. Let's see how this movement, can it be creative? Can it expose the fact of the past, free us from the past in the living present, and find the quality of freedom and beauty and love that relationship is supposed to be? Supposed. Forget the ideal, but can that come alive? Can that be something that burns between us, no matter who we are? And who we were may be irrelevant. Like Gay said, in time that takes away of all the world and destroys all relationships, I would add to Shakespeare, must have a stop. And Krishnamurti said it does. Let's see, let's test it. Let's relationship be the testing ground of whether the past can end and therefore can be a relationship. So I'll see if I can just, I ran a bit long today, so I'm not necessarily able to cover all the topics delicately, but the language as symbol and the dream as symbol become the same thing. I just want to put that across. The chapter is beautiful, that chapter on dreams. I loved it because I'm concerned with language as well, what language does. You can see that what we call artificial intelligence is language. See, we're functioning within language. There are language models. The world is a language model. The way nations are built are language models. There's nothing but language models. I mean, I started thinking, I said, but this is the same old symbolic system in which reality then we believe in, take parts of it, identify with, and that's me. He says there, the me is a symbol. And the moment thought identifies with it, gives it total importance, and it therefore separates. We're separated by labels. We're not separate. We're separated by labels. The dreamer separates itself from the dream, but the dreamer is the dream. He says, the observer is the observed. If that is the case, if we were to realize that, what need is there for interpretation? What need is there even for dreams? Don't dreams arise because we fragment our reality? And that fragmentation comes from this division of the past in relation to the present. Therefore, we must dream. What is the dream? Is the attempt to recapture, perhaps I'm venturing this forward myself, I'm not sure that he would say this, to recapture the meaning that we missed in the perception of reality through the past. The past misses something and is searching for it. The self is trying to compose itself as a whole by recovering the fragments it itself has created. Therefore, it can't. The interpreter of the dream is the dreamer, but the dreamer is what creates the dream by fragmenting itself from reality. Therefore, to understand the dream, you won't be able to even do it. He suggests that there's a way to bypass that whole thing by being totally aware of the movement of daily life without that separation. The choiceless awareness that he kept mentioning the whole time. Could we live that way? Could we see it this way? Whether thought arises or not, that's not the point. Is to see everything without this duality, this judgment, comparison, measure, choice. Is that the key? And this chapter also, to me, resonated with something that Krishnamurti, or brought to mind something Krishnamurti said, which was something seemingly mysterious, which was that for him, the deeper states of meditation were in sleep. So we're not talking about really something so extravagant, talking about sleep and dreams, because for him, the deeper states of meditation were in sleep. Why? Why would that be? That sounds like crazy. I used to make a joke. I mean, I'm not sure it was fair to the old boy, but say, oh, well, look at that. The awakened human beings are more awake in sleep. Right? I mean, that's what it takes. But you can see partly that here, this would be an explanation or a hint as to why that could be. Because living through the day in such a non-dual way puts order, dissolves the fragmentation that the symbolic perception of the observer brings about on reality, therefore eliminates the need for dreams. And when the body is at rest from its labors, is in an even deeper state of non-duality, for him, that's total wakefulness. So the brain, he says, the mind is never asleep. It is in a continuous, deep, and in fact deepening state of wakefulness. Is at rest, the body and the brain, but the mind is awake. I know nothing. I'm from Barcelona. This is just the way the old boy said, you know. And I mean, I had a couple of hints once, but those are minor. That there is this possibility and there is this indication, and this chapter on dreams goes towards pointing to the depths of meditation in sleep, so that the mind, see, there's not even the division between observer and observed. There's not the division between wakefulness and sleep. There's no division, but this total intensity of energy, which is the essence of meditation. I reverse the terms. Meditation as the essence of energy, but energy, undivided energy, as the essence of meditation. And he says that's the absence of self, which is the essence of skill in action, which is the essence of beauty, and which cannot exist without love. So he puts those together. Meditation as the absence of self, which is skill in action, which is beauty and love. He says living beauty and living love, because you're in touch with what is. There's nothing else in life but that. And that is his own freedom and his own totality of energy. And that's the essence of meditation. And as he used to ask us at Brockwood Park, can you live that way? I'm not sure. All right, I went a little bit over the time, I'm sorry, but the chapter today I thought deserved a long inquiry. All righty, leave it there. Let me get my coffee.
Just a little question, Javier. How comes the artist didn't talk about the artist today?
Because the poor guy just couldn't get to that chapter fast enough.
Okay, I see.
He wasn't sufficiently skilled in his action today. It's one of my, of course, I have a little bit of a slight bias that way because of my own interest in art. It's been like that, as I shared with you, you know, from since I was a kid. It's somehow there with me, and I've always appreciated it very much. It's a hint, no, at that quality of order, that quality of transcendence. But I remember he used to challenge us because he noticed that we were artists, and he saw we used to expose our work, you know, to show our work along the corridor of the school. We hung our work along, and he used to walk there. He had to walk through the to get to the west wing of Brockwood Park, and he was an observer without a past. That famous different observer, the observer without the past, right? There are two, you see, one with a past and one without. So this one had no past, but he was going past those arts, and he knew those works of art. So he could tell qualities and so on. So he knew about us. But I remember this thing was one of the things that sort of undermines slightly my own artistic vocation. He sat with us one day and he said, you may have a talent for this, and you may have a talent for that. Will that make you a good human being? I felt that from what I had heard him say, the answer was no. So he sort of took a little bit out of the meaning of art. I don't think that was his intent. His intent, I think, was like in this chapter to say, yes, there's a value to art, because art is skill in action. and absence of self in that skill in action. There's no skill in action without the absence of self, right? And that skill in action is beauty. The artist has that. And he says, but he may have it during an hour or two, or 10, whatever, however long that is painting, right? I mean, it happens, every artist will report that. I report the same. That when I am sort of involved with the work of art and really there is intensity, a sense of creative engagement and feeling with all that, as he talks about the intensity of feeling, of perception and so on, I disappear. In many ways, I'm not there. The self, the little self, scheming self, desiring self, fearful self, where is he? I mean, maybe somewhere in the background, he's in abeyance at least, no? So there is a freedom. That's why art becomes something that is sort of its own reward. Then he says, all right, then you think that then somebody comes along and discovers your work and you become famous and then the market destroys you. Yeah, all right. Yes, that hasn't happened. So I'm not sure what I'm destroyed by. By the lack of the market or by the market. So, but there is that quality of creativity. That's why I have quite a few friends who are artists in their own way or writers. They haven't published, they haven't done anything like this because there is something alive in the process. Kay cannot deny that and does not deny it. But then what he says is, I'm talking about the greatest art of all, which is the art of living. Skill in artistry as skill in the whole of life. That is what he calls beauty, properly speaking, because otherwise it's still not complete. Shares in the same quality, which is beautiful that he acknowledges that much, because otherwise the poor artist just abandons his talent and says, oh God, this is no good. This is just a fragment of the whole thing. What am I doing? I'm just trying to express myself. The whole thing goes to build up the self, and the self is at the heart of evil. So I'm just, all talent ends up in that same stream. So it's no good. So I'll go and do carpentry. But I don't know, beg for a living, do something else, right? You could abandon your talents. You have to be careful with Krishnamurti that way. I think he tended to confuse quite a number of people in terms of their own talents, that he sometimes didn't contextualize properly because in many ways he was all or nothing. But there's not all or nothing. There is all or something. The something still shares in the qualities of the all, but he says it's insufficient. You see, it's insufficient. You have to still go to the whole. We're talking about the art of living, which is skill in the whole of living, which is beauty, which is love as a whole. And that is the key, is this absence of self, right? The observation, but that includes the observation of the moment of self, so that we know it so thoroughly that it comes to order. The delusionary factors are dissolved, and there is just what is. Then we are artists. We are at one with what is, free from time, free from self. Therefore, fame, markets cannot destroy us. I like that. They won't destroy us. What is there to destroy when something is whole, right? You're nothing. You can't, nothing, you see. Nothing will destroy what is whole. There's no fragmentation, that is, right? So yeah, the artist is there and the expression is there. The artist, of course, wants to express. So I just covered the second chapter. He wants to express and he has a problem with the expression. And then he says, no, that's just an issue. But what matters most, the expression or the creation, right? The feeling and so on. And of course, he goes for that. So he doesn't deny that either. So Kay is an artist, one of the greatest artists. And all the others are still artists, though maybe not of that caliber. That's how I would put it. So don't throw art out of the window because it's like throwing the baby out with bad water, right? There's a lot of bad water, but you have to throw out something else. The art is sharing in the quality of goodness because it's still selfless and in its essence and is part of skill in action and beauty and love. He says there's no artistry without love. Even the artist can do art without love of some kind. That absence of self is a kind of love. It's a relationship with what is. So that is part of it. That's why I don't throw it out. No, not anymore.
On that note, Javier, in
Mm,
that same section, he has a question that he asked the questioner, or is there a state of being awake without any cause?
right.
And he doesn't answer it directly. So what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, he goes negatively about everything, just about, right? So if there is a cause, right, there is not an ending. And yeah, he questions cause, right? We do, cause for him is motive. And motive is a determination of the will, which is desire. But desire is a movement of thought, projection of a desirable end, of something that he wants to achieve. So it is within the known and therefore not change. Therefore, the causeless, that which is perception itself, is not that movement of time as achievement, arriving, doing, not doing. I don't think he sees change in that movement. Then maybe that's the reason why, you see, another question that keeps hanging around all this is why does he deny time as the factor of change? Eh? All of us hope that in time we will change. Most humanity says, time, give me time, and I will solve this problem. Scientifically, it seems to work pretty well. The scientists said in 10 years we will solve this issue. And boy, though they come close, they know time, they can estimate pretty well. I mean, I'm not in that field, so I'm not sure even the accuracy of what I'm saying. But some of the things that they have said seems to sort of says, in so long we will have this kind of computer, we will have this kind of medical treatment for this thing, and they often hit those marks.
But isn't that also part of the he talks about the change of cause and effect, the cause and
Yeah.
effect, the cause begets a further effects and so on and so on and so on and so on. So my sense of what he was taking is that actually you stepped outside of that whole thing. Like you were saying, when you put together cause to motive to will
Mm,
to known to me,
yeah, self, desire.
well,
That's cause. That's the moment of cause.
yeah, like in one of your nice little circular diagrams. Skill in
Mm,
action is the absence of the me. Art is the absence of the me. Life,
mhm.
beautiful life is the absence of me. Sounds very Buddhist, doesn't it?
Yeah, okay. The Buddha said, "Sir, you're saying the same thing the Buddha said in a modern idiom."
Hmm.
And Krishnamurti would say, "So what?"
Maybe you'll listen to me this time around.
I was there, when the Buddhists came of Rockwood Park to talk with Kay. And I mean, he was extremely polite. And we were not quite catching on to the subtlety. This was none other than what was his name? He was a famous scholar, Buddhist scholar. He had written the article for the what do you call it? The Encyclopedia Britannica on Buddhism. He was no no little man, and he came with a bunch of others, the Buddhists, some Zen Buddhists. He was from Sri Lanka, so he was from the Hinayana school, and there was then Tibetan Buddhists came. The Dalai Lama's later secretary, Samdhon Rinpoche, was there. And not at the time, I think it was in another time, but they were there. The Buddhists were always welcome at Brockwood Park. Everybody was welcome anyway at Brockwood Park. It didn't matter. Even the Bishop of Canterbury came once. But the Buddhists were like at home at Brockwood Park. You could see that they just felt like, oh. They felt they're in the presence of the Buddha. I don't think they ever had any hesitation in that regard. They read K and said, my goodness, the Buddha is speaking again in English. so so they were happy. You could see that they were very happy. They were just delighted to be there. And they wanted us, of course, to be near the old boy and to discuss with him. But he was from the no time, no method school. You see, the Buddhism is split in all kinds of schools, and one of them is the Southern school, Chan, which became Zen, right? The Chinese. He was a Chinese Buddhist. Well, he was a quintessential Indian Buddhist, but the sense of the Southern school, right? The sense of no time. It wasn't even sudden. Maybe something subtler than sudden. Of the no time, no method, no aim, no goal, no cause. The no cause is there for him. That the transformation of humanity comes from where then? If there's not a cause, right? For him, the cause is the chain that binds humanity to its own past. And when you break that chain, then there is freedom. The emergence of the breaking of the chain of cause is freedom. I think we discovered something. Yeah, let's see there. I think that's what I was trying to find. You see, where is this thing of the cause and no cause? Right? So he's no cause. He said the cause is this. What has continuity? Freedom within the field of consciousness is the breakdown of continuity. Because the continuity is the field of thought, is the field of self. Without continuity, it does not sustain. When there is no continuity, what is there? There's a break in the cause. Therefore, there's no effect. There's no effect. The breaking of the chain of causation is the greatest effect of all, because it wipes all effects out of the question. See, we spend our lives, this is very interesting, huh? And I don't know which, this fantastic, extraordinary thing. This is karma. This is the continuation of the cause and effect movement, right? And look what is our life. Our lives are like this, aren't they? Each personality is marked by chains, by a number of chains of causes and effects. When I talk, I'm back in my native area and I talk with my old friends when we went to school together and so on. And we were recalling, we were doing some volunteering work, reforesting the hills and looking after some goats. This is what we do. We're back to the pastoral life. But at the same time, we're sort of, how you say, catching up. But we're catching up with our past, which conditioned us. And in some cases, rather dramatically, rather traumatically. And I was laughing at certain things, for example, from the past, and they were not laughing. So there is this sense of how the past has shaped us. This is cause. We're the effects of those causes, the kinds of teachers we had, the kinds of parents we had, the kind of environment we grew up in, the authoritarian patriarchal structure of society, the agrarian rural subsistence farming community, the contact with nature, which helped us, our own intuitive, inquisitive, childlike curiosity about what was all about, our demand for freedom, our own little blips of intelligence and understanding, our sharing all that, you see, and everybody was shaped like that.
But
Was shaped.
you in that conversation, though, were seeing that. They were not seeing that. They were in that.
Maybe. But we were, I mean, now that we're recalling, we're kind of becoming aware a bit of it. Some people are still, what I could see is that some paths are still very strong, so that there is not really a distance from that past. That past is still a cause. That's part of what we're talking about.
I'm really trying to get back to that point where it says there's no way to maintain it. Like this is this waking up part. No practicing of it. There is only the seeing of it. And that word seeing for Kay is just shoulders a lot of the weight of his approach. It is like that's his approach, his seeing of it. Everything else is pointing to the seeing of it.
Yeah. It is. You see, in a chapter, I'll read it later though, because I failed to put it in the list. The chapter of what is, he ends by saying something of this. See, that seeing is all. See, seeing is the greatest skill. When he talks about skill in action, as in the whole of life, he says seeing is the greatest skill. No, it's not that one. I don't know which one is. But anyway, no, somewhere in there.
It's in the beauty one.
It's in the beauty one. There you are.
Yeah, the end of the beauty and the artist.
Beauty and the artist. So, right. So it's another chapter. So seeing greatest skill.
I mean, we talk about seeing, and you also just mentioned now, like the past. I mean, like you talk about the past with your friends and so on.
Yeah.
So
seeing the past.
I mean, like I was wondering about like the past as the origin of our thoughts, basically. Like, can you negate the past? Is seeing kind of like the negation of the past? Is that like a way to look at it, basically?
How do you go on? How do you see? How do you see
Yeah, I
that?
mean, like really, like you talk about like your memories, like you with your friends, and like how your father was. I mean, like we all have these thoughts.
Everybody
I mean,
has
like, can you just like negate all that? Negate any thought?
right. And how what's that mean, right? Because we're saying that freedom is the ending of self. Really is this past is the self. Is how it has shaped itself. The memory has how it has defined itself. I'm become the symbol of my own experience. The self is like the symbol of the sum total of that experience, or at least that's how it presents itself. That's how I sort of define myself. Maybe that's what Kay means by saying the self is also symbol. What does it stand for? The symbol stands for something. So it stands maybe for that, the distillation of all that experience, how he has shaped this personality, right? What does that mean, therefore, to see that? And is that the end of the past? How does the past end? It's the ending of me, of course, in that regard, no? But how does the me end? How does the me end? That thought ends when he sees the inadequacy of his intervention, the destructiveness of his intervention. But does it see it? Do we see it? Maybe we do. In some instances, we can catch it. No? Seeing is the ending of the movement of time as destructive, divisive factor in life. He can also see that time has its own place as knowledge and so on, practicals. Even recognizing people is important. He acknowledges that much. But careful with the perception that follows, right? It's very important. Well, how does the past end? Because for him, that's important, right? The observer is that past. As long as it persists, it creates division, separates us with its representations, which hide the present. It hides the present dead. And with this past, accumulation, projection, and remembrance, the remembrance of things past. How does it end? What does it mean to see it? Does it end when we see it? Does my past end when I see it in action? When I see myself as that past in action? It's not me as an agent that is acting in relation to a present, but in relation to a past from a past. I react to what I recognize in this person as yesterday, with my yesterday as I reacted to that past before. It creates a loop in which the past identifies the present and responds to itself from its own memory. That's what isolates me. That's what makes me a social being. In the sense of I'm naturally isolated by my own movement of self-recognition and other recognition, alter recognition and self-recognition, which is me. The other is me. There's no me in the other, because what I'm recognizing is what I'm responding to. And what I recognize is me, is my memory. This is the loop in which the self gets caught. The world exists for itself as a recognizable something, right? My girlfriend exists for me as I recognize her. She is my remembrance of her. What else is she for me? No, I don't have a girlfriend for the moment. So, but I know my girlfriend is always there, right? The sense of the other with whom we're related, right? The ones before and the ones that the mind invents, they're all there. These relationships are representations, which then, of course, has a reality and actuality. And to be able to relate to that means that past has to end. How shall I love this human being? How will love be if this past does not end? Does the past love? It can only love itself. Otherwise, the world is full of narcissists. Yep.
So in response to, does seeing the past end it or stop it, it's not so much that it stops it for me, it's that it stops it from driving the bus.
Right.
What?
It stops it from driving the bus.
From driving the bus. That's what I didn't guess. All right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I can relate to that. Basically, it stops. It has my past in certain areas has no longer any power over what I do.
Yeah.
There you are. But that's beautiful. You see, that's part of freedom. Otherwise, one is just a slave to that, to the past. One lives in the past. And it's a question of living, how to live, not even in this world, how to live, period. But of course, we live in this world. And the world is our relationships. And our relationships are determined by our consciousness, the consciousness being continuously caught in its own loop of self-recognition and self-interest, does not relate, and therefore is not alive, and is not in this world. You see, the world we create is out of that bubble, and therefore it becomes darkened by this division, which is now monstrously large. Humanity, as he said, will destroy without, if humanity, with all this materialism that he has cultivated, does not take the self out of it, it will destroy itself. We're talking about that kind of dimension, which is very actual. Of course, it's much more intimate. We have it in our own daily lives, right? Because I treat others also like material things. The self treats its objects, its means, its causes and effects, is causal and is bound to its own self-interest. And the past dominates. Otherwise, that identity would not persist. That's part of the diagnostics I see Krishnamurti is saying, and extending it. At one point, he says, when he talks about the labels and the language, which is a very important aspect of saying, we're separated by labels. But we are not labels. So what separates us? Right? Is there such separation? Is that if the label creates a separation, why are we so readily deceived, right? If the past is the label maker, thought is the label maker from the past, right? Draws the labels from his memory, then applies it, and then is that what we see. And that's what separates us, the labeling. It's also what joins people, supposedly, when they share the same label. People, they think they're also united by labels. They aren't, because the label is already a separation, it's an abstraction, and we are not abstractions. Caveman is very clear on that. If we persist on living, identifying ourselves as joining and separating from labels, we are living abstract lives. A life is the dream of abstraction, of symbolic language. Can that end? He's asking for an ending to the symbolic way of living.
Yeah, and I think, didn't he mention in that dreams chapter kind of something of a direct way of living that we are, I mean, I like this very much with the languages, right? And the symbol that the language, that we constantly talking in symbols, basically, and we are not realizing because we brought up in that way, and that there's a direct way. If somebody hits you, this is pretty direct.
yeah.
I thought he mentioned that. Didn't he mention that?
Yeah. I didn't mention it, but you see, because that sounded a bit too much like the Zen master hitting you with a stick, and therefore I said, no, I don't go in there.
No, but I liked it because that was so direct, right? That is what's missing. This kind of listening and just listening, or seeing and really seeing, and not this constant chattering or concept things, which is so quickly coming in for me. Yeah, and that's the difficulty, kind of.
No, but that's beautiful, because that also, he was saying something very subtle there. I think even subtler. No, he said, all right, somebody hits you, that's direct communication.
Yeah, that's what he said.
I remember when they hit me, and it was very direct communication, and I didn't think they were communicating very well with me. That very so that was a bit of a question regarding the old boy. But the sense of the direct experiencing of things, no? Not filtered through the symbol, right? That, and he was saying at another point, and I don't forget the chapters because they're all now running through each other, that the brain uses symbols to protect the self. From what? From perhaps this, from the direct hit of what is. What is like the stick that is constantly hitting you, right? I mean, maybe there's no you and therefore nothing to hit, but the sense of the impact of the immediacy of everything that is. Maybe that's, you see, as I was listening to you, Susan, of the sense of the impact, that we filter it, that we protect ourselves, maybe, from the full impact of things, that the brain does this. He talked about the brain, and that was a bit of an obscure little aspect of what was included in these chapters, that he was kind of putting it on the brain as doing something itself, that it wasn't just that thought needs to be quiet, but that the brain needs to be quiet, because the brain is the one that's producing thought. So there is something in the organic makeup and the self-protective drive of the brain that maybe lies behind the symbolic movement as a means of protection. But what is protecting, that's an interesting thing, is the self. But the self is the fundamental quintessence, as Krishnamurti sees it, of the danger of this self-protective movement of the brain. So the brain ends up, from this perspective, in a contradiction. See, it becomes rather, maybe I'm making it, Krishnamurti makes it so simple. No, it's all so simple. The brain does this, the brain does that. Then you start thinking a little bit, you say, all right, let's see. What can we even think it through? Right? He asked us to think it through, oh boy. He said to us, we're trying to think it through. And boy, there's a lot to uncover in that process, because if the brain is doing it, then it's not me doing it. It's the brain creating some structures. So there has to be an understanding of the brain also, of the substratum, the very organic drive of self-protection, which the brain itself is driving the brain to create these structures. I'm not sure of that, because I don't like to take it down. I feel this is a psychological issue. I'm trusting, but we have to question everything, of course, trusting that there is a seeing of the movement of thinking which is sufficient to detect the contradictory movement of self-protection through the symbol of that which has no reality. To perceive the illusion of the symbol is sufficient to tell the brain that what it's doing is mistaken. So I don't have to go to the brain. That's my thing. But maybe I'm just playing a trick, a very nice little trick, logical trick on myself to give myself a better chance of freedom than to say, go careful. You have to watch the brain. We have to just not watch thought, but something even more elementary, more organic, biological, instinctual in the brain. that has this drive of self-protection and develops these structures, including the symbolic structure, in order to protect itself. Look, it gets even more complicated. We see at one point, when discussing with Bohm in the dialogues of the ending of time, fantastic title. The apocalyptic people should read it. The ending of time is coming. So it does ask this question and says, well, why did the brain ever, lock itself into the self? Because they are seeing it as something that happened in the evolution of humanity. This happened at one point that in cases the brain couldn't take the fullness of the energy. Watch it. It becomes a very complex issue then, because we're calling for meditation as the essence of all energy, the bursting, the gathering of all energy, so that there's freedom from this very self-enclosed movement that we're now attributing to the brain as self-protection from the energy itself. I mean, if I start thinking that way, I get a little shaky. Because what? But there's something cosmic about it, see? We're talking cosmically also, because he's saying we're just not talking about me and you and this little insect that is going to aspire to some beauty and truth in his life, but we're talking about the very integration of the part with the whole, so that it merges into one full, free-flowing movement with no contradiction whatsoever. And that is the fullness of energy. The Theosophists described Krishnamurti, and he himself described himself as an experiment to see how much energy could flow through the human brain. That's why that brain had to be emptied so completely that he couldn't even remember himself. Look at that. I like these myths. This becomes mythological partly, no? They were entering into a kind of metaphysical, esoteric realm in which one doesn't know. I don't know. But interesting, you see, because that's what he talked about also at the end. He said, nobody knows how much energy, the energy of intelligence went through this body, a 12-cylinder engine. He liked cars. So there he was talking about a 12-cylinder engine. It was a 12-cylinder engine. We need 12-cylinder engines to let this through. But you see that brain, why was he fainting? When it started to happen, when the whole thing opened up and the energy began to flow in that unrestricted manner, because he's doing meditation, the good old boy. He was already free in some fundamental sense, according to the record that we have. But he started meditating. Suddenly he got the idea. I'm going to get back. I'm going to undo the wrong turnings of my development, he said. It took him only days. The guy was too much advanced. So in a few days, the whole thing began to flow. First, non-duality. He was everything and in everything, and everything was in him. So no inner and outer. And then this energy began to flow. And the guy would just faint and scream with pain like you wouldn't believe. I mean, for modern psychiatric systems, he should have been locked up. Luckily, they knew nothing about it. You see, they don't understand these processes of the flowing of energy and the breaking down on the normal balance of this brain can't take it. The pain he experienced for the rest of his life, the process, he attributed it, as far as I can understand, to this very element of the brain not able to take it fully, anyway. But it's not a pain, a pathological state. And the brain maybe understands that. That's the beautiful thing. And therefore it can take it. See, Krishnamurti, he used to say, I am used to pain. I can take a lot of pain. Because of this, because of the energy that was opening this channel, when the channel opening, the energy was just blasting this brain, and the brain was just screaming. Okay, so I'm not sure. You see, some friends of mine says, I'm having some pains. Is that awakening? The joke, of course. You see, everybody wants to, and now everybody looks for the signs of pain to see if they're That whatever it is opening the chakra, the final chakra, whatever. No, that's not how it works. You will know what kind of energy is flowing and what kind of pain. It's a very healthy pain. When something in us genuinely opens up, for example, to the fullness of beauty, there will be a pain, a healthy pain, not the pain of frustration of the artist, in terms of the disconnection between the intensity of feeling and his expression, which they talk about in one of these chapters, but the pain of the narrowness of our own system as we have developed in terms of meeting the intensity of that totality of energy. Like giving birth. I mean, I don't know what that means, but I believe, you see, there's an intense pain, but it's a pain that has its own inbuilt joy in it because of what it means. It's a tremendous sense of, yeah, life is coming. This is a kind of life. This is what it means to live in the world, is the fullness of life, is the fullness of energy. And this brain has narrowed itself down. And because of its narrowness, it will experience pain at its opening. But otherwise, there will be no birth. Oh, that's there a metaphor. This is what we're talking about, perhaps. I mean, I'm not looking forward to any pain, but but if it comes and if it's that healthy, then the system will know it, you see? That's like giving birth. Nobody says, I don't want to give birth. That's the way. You may be screaming, but it is the way of life.
Hey, Javier.
Hey.
Well, there's a lot of ways, I guess, to riff on what you just said, but the this kind of thing, this dissociative boundary, I refer back to analytic idealism. The fundamental nature of reality is mind, and when we start talking about brains and things, I don't see it in terms of, you know, physical matters and atoms gathering together to produce something. Donald Hoffman's conscious agents theory comes to mind when you're speaking the way you are about this energy. There's beings like us that have this, you know, limited scope, and in a way, thank goodness we do. You know, this explosive energy that Krishnamurti and others, you know, have felt is seems like kind of a rupture of this boundary that, in essence, protects us as these supposedly living biological carbon-based units, right? And it's very limited. And in a way, we owe this experience of being a carbon-based unit to this boundary. And the refresh rate of what's going on, let's just call it creation, is unfathomable. You know, if we're just to touch into that as beings like us, dissociative beings, it just, I don't know what would happen. I guess we just like blow up or something, you know? So we have to see things in a sense, at least the way I understand it, from this limited perspective. You know, that is really the only way. I mean, can we even exist if it's just this open field? And so I kind of like what, you know, Dan and Judith had mentioned earlier. And it's like, well, there's this gradation of sort of determining how much of, you know, what memories do I want to relabel? You know, you get into sort of psychological stick handling in a way, but it can become useful. I mean, I don't think it's being suggested that we just all have lobotomies and electroshock therapy and just wipe out memory altogether.
No.
You know, because some people, have found that useful, of course. And this has been going on since the 20s and 30s, as I understand it, And so there's something there that I think warrants some discussion in terms of is memory useful, and okay, well, which memories and how often and etc. I guess that's pretty much what I have to say, but I think there's some interesting exploration there with what's happening in the world of science with Hoffman and the mathematics he's compiling around his conscious agents theory. These dissociative boundaries that somehow bring phenomenal experience into our little monkey brains, And in the end, you say so much in your talks. I just love it. And Ralph, I don't know if I can have access to a couple of the previous recordings because there's content that I just never had a chance to review, and it's just loaded. I'd love to go back and take a few more notes. But how to live seems like I don't know, it doesn't seem like a simple question, Anyway, good being here. Thanks, you guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, just contact me, Van, about which recordings you're talking about. We'll see.
Thank you, Ralph.
Yeah, I'm so happy that we're recording these sessions because they're really, I think, very, very valuable and powerful. And thank you so much, Javier, for being able to do all this after doing a 5-hour session before this.
You can see the kind of effort I put in. I get even a bleeding noses.
I don't know how you do it.
I'm taking the punch.